What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So many people right now are expecting a February Nintendo Direct, but now there seems to be a bit of back and forth, some doubt even being casted on that, and a whole lot of confusion where things are just getting kind of weird about it, but we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about some changes to different stores curation with Sony seemingly going after some of those really annoying spam games, and Valve putting their foot down when it comes to in-game advertising, especially with games that are actually, sold for money. We'll go over that though, guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below. And we're going to start today with an ESRB rating that popped up that sort of has all the pieces falling into place here for Capcom to do what Capcom does best. And that's re-release old games on new platforms. They do it a lot, and in this case you can see Resident Evil 5 getting a rating with the ESRB for the Xbox Series X, and this sort of lines up with what we saw recently with the rating for Resident Evil 6. I guess we could see them re-release Resident Evil 5 and 6 maybe as a double pack or just single separate releases digitally for Xbox Series X, S, PlayStation 5, and maybe just taking advantage of some of the newer features there and maybe doing some work on the visuals and different frame rate options, that kind of stuff. I mean, again, Capcom does this quite a bit, so it's not shocking to see it. I'm just curious more so what they'll maybe do with some of the content potentially in the game and how they'll package the whole thing. Maybe we'll even get a physical copy, a disc, say, for the PlayStation 5 that has 5 and 6 directly on it. But I guess we'll keep an eye out for this one because to me, 5 and 6 as re-releases or remasters even for new platforms could even be announced just on Twitter one day with a random press release. Also, we had some interesting information when it comes to the retro gaming scene. So how many people out there play retro games as opposed to newer titles? Well, this was a survey we can see that was quoted over on Time Extension. This is a survey from Consumer Reports, and they say an impressive 14% of North Americans are still gaming on platforms released before the year 2000. So that wouldn't even count. They don't even count that as like PS2 or GameCube or Xbox. We're talking Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, Genesis, N64, Dreamcast, PS1, and I guess you could throw Neo Geo or 3DO or others in there. 14% though, still playing those different platforms. They also mentioned that 15% of consumers have watched a movie on VHS, I guess, in the last year, which I don't have a VCR hooked up at all. I might have a few VHS tapes laying around. I know there are many at my parents' house. Some of the older tapes that we watch now is much younger. But I mean, I think just in general with gaming, it's certainly timeless to a degree, right? You can still play some of the original Nintendo games, and they actually hold up pretty well as like the 2D 8-bit style games. Early 3D is still kind of sketchy, but there's a certain charm to it. So it's not shocking to hear that. I mean, 14% doesn't sound like a lot. That's millions of people if you really extrapolate that, right, in general for the North American audience there. But I guess just with the recent retro boom, not too shocking, especially since that doesn't include really some of the most popular systems like the PlayStation 2 that is considered retro and nostalgic by many people now. Oh, and if you're someone who's wondering where Dragon Quest 12 is, don't worry, you're not alone because, well, it appears that the creator, Yuji Horii, even had to kind of like mention, hey, it's still happening, guys. Don't worry. We can see this is posted up. This is over on Automaton Media, saying Ori comments that the development team is working hard on Dragon Quest 12 and that he hopes to release new information about the game little by little. Okay, the game was announced more than 3 years ago now, and it was little of than a title screen and kind of a tone like, oh, this is going to be for a more mature audience or more mature tone is what they're taking, and I'm really curious about the gameplay changes they may do to it, but also the fact that it could actually be an M-rated title for Dragon Quest, which if you've gone back and played them, sure, it has some underlying mature themes to it, but it's usually bright and colorful and loud with some of the orchestra music and stuff, so I'm interested, and that's one of the reasons why it's kind of painful to be waiting this long. 3 years since then, and all they're saying is, we'll reveal, little by little. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with that apparent February Nintendo Direct that has been rumored for a little while now that there would be a Direct ahead of the Switch 2 showcase that'll be happening April 2nd. That rumor has actually been going on for a while now, I think a couple months, that we would have a Switch 1 Direct before the Switch 2 event. So, with that in mind, it's it's more than a third of the way through, right, February at this point. We're looking around like, oh, when is that Direct gonna happen? Well, that means, of course, doubt is creeping in, as we've seen many, many times in the past. So we can see this, for example, over on Twitter that was actually picked up and quoted here. This was from My Nintendo News. This is Nate the Hate responding to someone asking about that February Direct, and he just says he has nothing to share beyond there being rumored talk of a February Direct. Haven't heard anything about one or when one may happen. Currently in the dark on whether a February Direct will come to be or not. So this has led to people starting to kind of pit PH Brazil versus Nate the Hate, which is kind of strange. That whole thing, it's kind of weird, but we can see even PH Brazil, this is over on Famiboard, sort of responding to all this, saying about the Direct, I'll keep looking into things, and in case I learn of anything that contradicts what I've said previously, I'll be open with it as I've always been. Regardless, as far as I'm aware, I was the only person who knew and talked about the August Direct last year, all the way to the day it was announced, so from my perspective, it's happening now isn't enough to make me doubt my sources yet. Also going to say that the Nate the Hate versus PH Brazil stuff is annoying, they like Nate, the piece and all that stuff, but in this case, of course, people are getting antsy because, again, we're a third of the way through February. You wouldn't expect it this week, mostly because we're expecting a state of play, and while you can still have these different kind of showcases all happen in 1 week, still you're thinking in your mind in the background these companies are trying to plan things out even around each other if they can, especially when it comes to a random week in February. So if we are to believe then that the state of play is Thursday or Friday this week, then we probably wouldn't have a Nintendo Direct the last week of February because we're expecting a Pokemon Presents to happen on Pokemon Day, like right at the end of this month of that final week, which actually then leaves next week as the final week. But I think it's also worth considering that Nintendo may not feel the need to do a full-fledged Direct and instead maybe just announce a couple things on Twitter. Remember, all they really have to do right now is fill in some of the gaps as they are leading up to the Switch 2's launch. When that April 2nd event happens, they're not all of a sudden going to have stuff ready to go for like April and then even the first bit of May. Let's say the Switch 2 launches at the end of May. That would leave pretty much April and May completely open. Pokemon ZA will most likely get that release date during that Pokemon Presents that was data mined already thanks to Pokemon Go, and that could indeed fill in April or May. But I think more than likely Nintendo has a few things to announce, and that could actually be done just by way of Twitter. Like, hey, here's this game, and that's going to fill us in until we get to April 2nd, because really only need a couple of announcements to get them there, as Xenoblade Chronicles X is already set up for March for next month, and then Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, I assume, is going to be one of the games that gets showcased during that Switch 2 presentation as a cross-gen title. So we'll keep an eye out, I guess, any other things break here when it comes to Nate or PH Brazil. But in Nate's case, he's typically someone who will wait to be absolutely sure before he puts it out there, as much as he can be. And that was one of the reasons he was so confident leading up to the Switch 2 shadow drop, or just immediate release of that trailer, because he's, again, pretty confident going into that there would be a Switch 2 overview hardware trailer of some kind, even up to that morning when he was posting images of him or stock photos of a person relaxing on the couch. But let me know what you think about this one down below. Are you still expecting a February Direct, since we're like more than 10 days now into the month? Next up, let's talk about Valve and a store policy that's gotten a bit more of the spotlight now. It is worth noting that this policy isn't technically new, but it seems like Valve is trying to put a bit more of attention on it, if you will. So much so you can see this over on GameSpot. It says Valve seemingly bans all Steam games that require watching advertisements to play. Quote, developers should not utilize paid advertising as a business model in their games, such as requiring players to watch or otherwise engage with advertising in order to play, or gating gameplay behind advertising. If your game's business model relies on advertising on other platforms, you will need to remove these elements before shipping on Steam. They were quick, this over on GameSpot, quick to point out that, oh, this actually might not be that new, as SteamDB posted this on their Blue Sky account, saying Valve has created a dedicated page describing that in-game ads or ad-based revenue models are not allowed in Steam games. This has been reported as a new policy, but this has been the case for at least 5 years, as seen on the pricing page. There just wasn't a separate page, which is, yes, technically live right now in the Steamworks documentation under advertising on Steam, and they go over many things that are supported, like product placement, cross promotions, paid advertising outside of Steam's versus things that are not supported, such as, I guess, putting up a wall to advertise to you before you say get to gameplay, like, hey, you gotta watch 10 seconds of this ad before you can jump into level 3. So pretty straightforward in that sense, because you are starting to get to the position of things that would be then looked at as spam, and at times just misleading content, because they might not even tell you that that's in the game until you spend $50, say, on it, and then you get in and it's like, oh wait, you have to hang out and wait on what looks like a load screen that's taking a little longer than you'd expect on your lightning fast SSD. So why don't you hang out for a little while here while we show you the latest Coca-Cola ad or something like that. So it makes sense. Steam, again, very much tied to their storefront. I mean, that's the entirety of their business. Also keep in mind, Valve being a private company can just kind of enact these things and shape things a bit easier and more on the fly, I'd say, than most platforms in general right now. So it makes sense that they would protect as much as they can when it comes to a platform that they are trying to show as more and more of being an open platform, which, I mean, you could scroll through the listings. There's certainly a lot of junk on Steam, but within reason. They have guardrails that while are set out pretty wide, are indeed there, and this just seems to be one of the factors they want to try to avoid. Next up, let's talk about Sony, who appears to have made a quiet change for PlayStation Network with the store that I think is completely welcome. Like, I'm really happy to see some actual curation when it comes to this, and it's something I'd like to see from, like, Nintendo, for example, with their eShop, but you gotta start somewhere, and in this case, it seems like it happened after IGN had a bit of a report go out. We can see this posted up. This is over on True Trophies. Says in a recent interview with IGN, multiple developers spoke up about the poor state of Sony's PlayStation Store, how difficult it is to navigate compared to the store page on Xbox. The developers also discussed the never-ending list of spam games and how easy it seems to get them approved on Sony's PlayStation Store. So this was spotted by over on PSN Profiles. There's a forum talking about this, and they found that a developer called Random Spin Games, which, I mean, that is like the most obvious name for a developer who is basically taking already created games, throwing assets at them, and then flipping them, and doing all kinds of low quality work. Again, spinning games together like that in order to put them up, low quality effort on the store to flood the market. Says they've had almost its entire catalog of games delisted from the PlayStation Store. This developer was well known for low effort titles like classics with Body Cam Shooter, Supermarket Simulator Pro, Backrooms Brotherhood. It's one of the few they say they're still online after the cleanup, and Backrooms Inside the Escape. And for the longest time, the PlayStation Network had games that even looked like they were borderline like AI generated at times. At least some of the artwork you can kind of tell was, or at least was in that realm. And then you had the games that were really just there to be easy platinum trophies, which I gotta say, having a game like that give you a platinum trophy is, I think that's more of a stain on a profile than anything else. Sure, it adds that number to your platinum trophy count, but eventually it's going to look so inflated and people go in and see, okay, what do you have the platinum trophies in? And you see Supermarket Simulator Pro, and it's like, oh, it was a 2-minute platinum. Some games legitimately would give you a platinum for pressing like square. And to some people, I guess that was worth $2, but that's sort of what they were preying on here in terms of developing these low-effort games, because you get that low-effort platinum, I guess. So the problem you run into is it, of course, floods the entire market and pushes down some of the quality titles. And I guess from here, it looks like Sony had enough, at least with Random Spin. So we'll see if they're able to clean it up even further, or maybe there are some developers we just never noticed that are now gone with some of their games being delisted. I think it's really just a restructuring, moving games around and letting some of the best titles at least be found, or high quality titles be found, and let it be yes, still a free market, but one that's at least somewhat curated. I mean, Again, when you have to scroll down through many pages just to get some of the standard and basic games you'd expect to see, then yeah, you have a bit of a problem. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Grand Theft Auto 6 once again, with Take-Two discussing hardware sales that they say appear to be a bit lower than expected right now between Xbox Series and PlayStation 5, and also PC support. This we can see, though, with a quote from Strauss Zelnick to investors, saying, "When you have a big title in the market, and we have many of them coming, historically, that has sold consoles, and I think that will happen this year. I don't think tariffs are going to be our friend, but I think there will be a meaningful uptick in console sales in calendar 25 because of the release schedule. Not just coming from us, but coming from others. So I'm not concerned about that console sales falling. I think the trend that you'd want to focus on is this increasing share of the market that is reflected in PC. We have seen PC become a much more important part of what used to be a console business, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that trend continue. Of course, there will be a new console generation, which I'm sure they're very much aware of the PlayStation 6 and whatever Microsoft is working on for their next Xbox Series successor. So with that in mind, they're still years and years out, at least from the PS6, maybe a couple years from Xbox, but they're looking, Strauss Zelnick, Take-Two, obviously looking at GTA 6 and the effect that will have on the console market, which is that it will most likely, as we assume, spike sales in general across the board. And when he's mentioning console sales being a bit softer than expected, it is mostly directed at Xbox right now, as PS5 is right in line. They're pretty close to the PS4. And when you're like, okay, if you add both consoles together, and they're not necessarily getting to that number, what's kind of holding it down? And yeah, it's the Xbox right now. But I will say GTA 6 running on a cheaper Xbox Series S, I mean, that will be enticing to many people out there, I'm sure, who are still sitting with, say, their Xbox One, and they're thinking about it, even just maybe haven't been in console gaming for a while. They see GTA 6 pop up and realize, oh, that Xbox Series S, I can find that for $250 pretty easily. Maybe I'll go with that. And I know it's not going to be 4K 30 or maybe 4K 60 at the PS5, we'll see. But like, it's not going to be, 4K 30, 1440p 30. It'll be like 900p 30, but they might not care. They're just now getting into console gaming again, maybe after 5, 6, 7 years or something. It's new to them. It looks good. So that will be an interesting effect to see. As for PC, though, Take-Two did share that their most lucrative market right now is mobile. It's like 52% or something like that. And then you look, then it's console. PC was only 8%, but they are noticing that PC is boosting the market in general. Like, that's where a lot of people seem to be going right now. It's just, in general, it's becoming easier and easier than ever before to get a custom PC, whether you're building it or having a pre-build. It's when I was younger, it's way easier now. Like, it was a whole thing. When I was younger, you had a couple of different places you could order parts from, and if it wasn't compatible, it was a nightmare to send it back, or if you were lucky, even return it at a CompUSA, which I had for a while before they disappeared on me. So basically, Take-Two, yes, it'll go to console first. It's pretty clear they're going to ramp up development and get things set up for GTA 6 to go to PC probably the following year. And that will be another massive launch for GTA 6. So yeah, right now, Take-Two, I think, holds all the cards when it comes to just the trajectory of console sales and when GTA 6 comes out, which, according to them, still happening calendar 25. And the fact that they're even talking about things like this, they seem really confident. So I guess at some point they're going to drop that other trailer, which realistically they could do at any time, and the internet would probably break all over again. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, now that multiple betas have taken place, are you picking up Monster Hunter Wilds? 50% say they're not interested, 30% say maybe later if there's a sale, then 20% say they're getting it ASAP, which, okay, 50% of people are at least interested enough to, at the bare minimum, wait for it when it goes on sale, which, look, we've seen Monster Hunter games, of course, not only go on sale, but also go into things like PlayStation Plus, Xbox Game Pass eventually. So Monster Hunter Wilds will be big when it drops, right? Here in a few weeks, no doubt. The beta was massive, and it was a frustrating thing, of course, to see the PlayStation Network outage. While that was going on, people were not happy. And I do look at this as maybe the next big push for them, similar to Monster Hunter World, because while Monster Hunter, I've been like, in and out with the series. I'm kind of looking at it like, okay, that could be fun if I get enough people together and run multiplayer and stuff with it. So no doubt, massive sales right out of the gate, especially in, say, Japan, and certainly in the West, as we've seen it do nothing but grow here as well. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Austin, who says, nice of Sony to show PC players quickly exactly why they were right to push back on that PSN requirement. That's a fair point, because I guess if you can't, so if you had, I didn't even ask if this was a thing. Let's say you had the required login on Helldivers 2 and PSN was down, were you able to get in? I mean, you could still log in. Like, I was able to log in still with PSN being down. It's just some of the multiplayer aspects weren't working. But let's say it was really bad. Like, there was an outage like we saw, again, in 2011. Would that just knock out the PC game as well? Because that would be really bad, since that would have no real purpose. Like, there's not a console it's tied to or anything. And then it also gets into the idea of them maybe having their own PC launcher at some point. What if that saw an outage for an extended period of time? Then people, guess what, would just go back to Steam? That's the thing with PC. It's very easy to click off one window and open another. There you go. So yeah, that's something Sony clearly wants to avoid, but true, PSN was down longer than I thought it'd be. Again, I thought an hour, ended up being almost an entire day, and not a great look for Sony coming back with even the 5-day thing. Just the fact that it was down for as long as it was and so many people were affected. Slight confidence shaker there. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe to hear more about Nintendo's response when it comes to cross-gen between the current Switch and the Switch 2, I'll leave that right below. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.